there is also this talk of the inevitability of Mr. Romney's nomination. But that leaves a sort of bitter aftertaste in the mouths of many of the Republican rank and file. What does that suggest for a Republican turnout in November?
I think it will come together. You know, it's interesting if we remember back 4 years ago, Senator McCain didn't do well in Iowa. In fact, a little bit earlier than that, he was really thinking about getting out of the race because his numbers were so bad. And really had kind of the same rap that perhaps he wasn't conservative enough. But once he won the nomination, things came together, then the base rallied. It'll depend, not depend, but I think it will help, you know, to have depending on the candidate that's selected, a strong second running mate, you know, to get people excited. So, you know, it really is in flux right now.
Well, if the numbers that I checked as of last night were correct, among candidates, Mr. Paul was first in financial contributions from Arkansans, followed fairly closely by Governor Perry. Two iconoclastic sort of guys. Mr. Paul, of course, still in, but the odds do not seem to favor his being a nominee.
Well, I don't think you can rule him out, though, because he has such a he does have a very, very strong base, you know, that's very supportive.
Certainly very enthusiastic.
Very enthusiastic.
Is the message there about the Arkansas Republican or Arkansas pretty evident in those numbers? Although Mr. Obama, let me say, Mr. Obama leads in Arkansas in terms of campaign contributions so far in the 12th cycle.
I'm really not familiar, you know, with the numbers as far as the states and where they've come from, but that doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, on the GOP side, though, with Mr. Perry and Mr. Paul dominating the contributions from Arkansas, that would appear to say something about the mood or the mindset of likely Republican voters in Arkansas.
I think that's right.
They want the real thing.
I think that Arkansas is a conservative state, you know, as a whole, and so that shows up, I think, you know, with the Perry-Paul campaign. And then, too, you know, Congressman Paul is preaching kind of a let's pull in our horns, you know, type thing. And I think that's resonating well with a lot of people, not only in Arkansas, but throughout the country. And that's the difference, you know, between he and some of the other candidates, I think.
You have in your chamber, and Mr. McConnell in your conference, a minority leader who is renowned for his sinew, put it that way. On the other side of the Capitol, there is a speaker who literally had to throw shoes to get his caucus to follow his lead this last time. Now, I realize it isn't your part of the same party. Is it your impression that and he's got a tough job because he's got a heavily bifurcated Republican conference to run, but is he in control over there? Is there control in the House? I mean, he had it in December, but...
Yeah. I think that he is, and I think that as the year goes by, and maybe even with what happened towards the end of the year that we just discussed, I think that might strengthen his hold a little bit more. The reality is that when you're in control, as the Republicans are in the House of Representatives, you have to govern. And so they have to forge a coalition among themselves and somewhat with Democrats to get things done. In the Senate, it's different. You know, Senator Reid has to do the same thing. So the real negotiations that occur are going to have to be between Senator Reid and Speaker Boehner. And they've been able to work somewhat together, you know, as the year went by. But this thing in December really did. I don't think there was very good communication at all.
Well, apparently there was a communications gap between some of the Republican caucus and the Tea Party caucus, and between the Speaker and the Majority Leader over there, Mr. Cantor. They were just at loggerheads for the longest time.
I think so, and I think one of the things that we haven't talked very much about that's real important that was part of that deal was, in the Senate bill, in fact, what was agreed to ultimately, it made the president decide on the Keystone Pipeline, which is really important. There's just absolutely no reason not to do the Keystone Pipeline. You talk about shovel-ready jobs. There's tens of thousands of shovel-ready jobs that would happen immediately.
Immediately?
Immediately. We would be getting a good portion of that pipeline is going to be built in Little Rock. And so, again, they've had to let as a result of not going forward. So, yeah, immediately. And then, you're getting your oil instead of getting it from Venezuela and Saudi Arabia and places like that. You're lessing in the sense then you're getting it from one of probably our most trusted ally, Canada. Coming down, using the pipeline. The thing is being studied to death. There's 50-some-odd pipelines, underneath Texas. And again, this is very safe. We need to do all of these things in an environmentally sound way. But the president wasn't doing that strictly over that end of the environmental community that's pretty radical. And so he, wasn't going to do that until after the election, make a decision. This bill actually forces him to go ahead and make the decision so the public can understand where he stands.
Well, let me move on if I can.
And I think that was a real selling point to Senate Republicans, was that was included, that it was a huge deal.
Well, on the House side, was this a reaction, rightly or wrongly? Your party's getting the black eye. Came out of this mess with the larger of the two black eyes, anyway. In public opinion polls, several that I have seen, it was the GOP caucus that was given most of the blame for the budget confusion at the end of the year. Was it that moved the House off dead center, and for that matter, the Senate caucus too?
I think that just the pressing of the end of the year where you had to get something done, realizing that Senator Reid wasn't going to budge, that he was pretty tough in his negotiating. I think that's really what made the difference. But there was poor communication. The House, they passed a bill, got the votes to get it done, and they felt like they had a very good bill. Sent it to the Senate, and Senator Reid just said, no, we're not doing this. And so that's really where they were upset.
Well, there were some Republican members as well who were kind of taken aback by the House bill, were they not? In other words, Senator Reid kind of wound up taking the heat for some Republican members.
Yeah, I think the big thing that the House wanted was to move into a conference committee where the Senate passes something, the House passes something, and then you let the conferees get together and essentially decide, some sort of compromise. But that just didn't happen.
You have been more than respectful of the Tea Party, and yet you have managed to keep some distance from them. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you declined to join the Tea Party caucus in the Senate. And the other day, you supported Mr. Blunt of Missouri for secretary or chairman of the Republican conference in the Senate over Mr. Johnson, who was clearly the Tea Party's choice. Why?
Well, Ron Johnson has become a very, very dear friend and is a good guy, and is going to make a great senator, and I think really be a player as time goes by. And it's interesting, he's one of the first guys that I met and really developed a friendship like that. When I was first elected to the House of Representatives, winning a special election, when Asa went on to become head of DEA, the first guy that I met in a similar way was Roy Blunt. Roy had the district adjacent to me in Missouri, the Springfield area and things. There's just a long history of working together. The border stops there, but the people don't stop there. It's basically the same. And so we've just developed a long relationship for many, many years. I was part of the whip team. He was the head whip, and so that's really where that came from. I think Roy is a very thoughtful guy that's going to do a tremendous job. And then again, help us avoid some of the things that we had on this last go-around. I think a lot of that was just poor communication amongst the Senate and the House. I think he really brings that, especially with him, being in House leadership. In regard to the Tea Party,